My name is Matthew, and at 32 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. After years of hard work, I finally bought my dream home in Seattle, a sanctuary I earned through countless late nights coding and sacrifices others wouldn't make. 3 weeks ago, I decided to reward myself with a vacation to Thailand, my first real break in years. I never imagined that my own family would steal what I worked so hard for while I was gone. Before I tell you how my life got turned upside down, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Growing up in Portland wasn't easy for us. My dad worked as a carpenter, and my mom Diana waited tables at a local diner. We weren't poor, but money was always tight. I shared a bedroom with my sister Amanda until I was 12, and new clothes were a luxury reserved for special occasions. Despite the financial struggles, we were happy, at least until my father died unexpectedly from a heart attack when I was 14. His death changed everything. Mom was suddenly a single parent at 40, trying to raise a rebellious 16-year-old daughter and a quiet, bookish son. Dad had minimal life insurance, so Mom picked up extra shifts to keep us afloat. During those years, the dynamics in our family solidified into patterns that would haunt us decades later. Amanda was always the golden child. 3 years older than me, she was pretty, popular, and had a magnetic personality that drew people to her. She looked just like our mom, with the same warm brown eyes and infectious laugh. Teachers loved her charisma, and she never lacked friends or boyfriends. What she did lack was financial sense. By 18, Amanda had her first credit card, which she maxed out buying clothes and throwing parties. Mom paid it off. At 20, she dropped out of community college because she found a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to join a friend's startup boutique. Mom gave her $5,000 from her savings to invest. The boutique closed 6 months later. This pattern continued throughout her 20s. Grand ideas, borrowed money, spectacular failures, and Mom bailing her out. Meanwhile, I took a different path. After Dad died, I became acutely aware of our financial insecurity. I started working at 16, bagging groceries after school and on weekends. Every dollar I earned went into savings, except for the portion I gave Mom to help with bills. I studied relentlessly, knowing education was my ticket to stability. When college acceptance letters came, I chose the one offering the best computer science program with the most substantial scholarship. Those college years were brutal. I took maximum course loads each semester while working 20 hours weekly at the university IT help desk. While other students partied, I was debugging code or pulling all-nighters in the library. I graduated with honors, minimal debt, and 3 job offers. I started at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle, living in a tiny studio apartment and saving aggressively. When most of my coworkers upgraded their lifestyles with each raise, I kept my expenses low. After 4 years of exceptional performance reviews and strategic job changes, I landed a senior position at Amazon with a salary that finally reflected my skills. During these years, Amanda bounced between jobs, relationships, and addresses. She worked as a restaurant hostess, a retail manager, a real estate assistant, and briefly tried selling wellness products in a pyramid scheme. Nothing stuck. Each failure came with mounting debt and another bailout from Mom, who by then had developed health problems that limited her own earning potential. When I turned 30, I finally felt ready to buy property. The Seattle housing market was brutal, but years of disciplined saving had prepared me. After months of searching, I founded a gorgeous 4-bedroom Craftsman in a desirable neighborhood. The asking price was $750,000, steep but within my budget thanks to my substantial down payment and excellent credit score. The day I got the keys was one of the proudest moments of my life. I remember walking through each room, hardly believing this beautiful space was mine. The hardwood floors, the built-in bookshelves, the bay windows overlooking a lush backyard. It represented every sacrifice I'd made. Mom and Amanda came to my housewarming party. Amanda made jokes about me being disgustingly responsible while Mom beamed with pride. That night, Mom pulled me aside and told me how proud Dad would have been. It was one of the few times I'd seen her cry since his funeral. A few months after moving in, I traveled to San Francisco for a work conference. When I returned, I found water damage in my kitchen from a leaky pipe that had gone undetected. The experience made me realize I needed someone to check on the house during my absences. I asked Mom if she'd be willing to stop by occasionally when I traveled. She agreed eagerly, saying it would give her peace of mind too. I made her a key, and on my lawyer's advice, signed a limited power of attorney that would allow her to handle emergency repairs or issues with the property in my absence. This document would later become the instrument of my undoing, though I had no way of knowing it then. For almost 2 years, the arrangement worked perfectly. Mom would water my plants, collect my mail, and occasionally stay overnight if she had appointments in Seattle. I trusted her completely with my home. This past spring, after a particularly intense product launch at work, I decided I needed a real vacation, not just a weekend getaway, but weeks of genuine disconnection. I booked a 21-day trip to Thailand, planning to explore Bangkok, Chiang Mai, and several islands in the south. In the weeks leading up to my departure, I was so focused on wrapping up projects and preparing for my absence from work that I missed the warning signs. Amanda called more frequently than usual. Mom asked detailed questions about my travel insurance and when exactly I'd be unreachable. At the time, I attributed their interest to concern about my first major international trip. I couldn't have been more wrong. The moment my plane touched down in Bangkok, I felt the weight of responsibility lift from my shoulders. The humid air, vibrant streets, and smiling locals immediately captured my imagination. My first few days were a blur of temple visits, street food adventures, and getting lost in the labyrinthine markets of the capital. I stayed in a boutique hotel in the heart of the city, a small splurge that felt justified after years of frugality. My room overlooked a canal where long-tail boats ferried tourists and locals through the watery arteries of Bangkok. Each morning, I'd wake to the sounds of the city coming alive, vendors setting up stalls, monks chanting in a nearby temple, the perpetual hum of motorbikes. By day 3, I'd established a routine that involved morning meditation at whatever temple I could find, followed by exploration until the afternoon heat became unbearable. Then I'd retreat to my hotel for a few hours before venturing out again for evening markets and dinner. I'd limited my phone use to once daily a quick check of emails in the morning, then airplane mode for the rest of the day. This digital detox was deliberate. Years of being constantly connected had taken a toll, and I wanted to experience Thailand without the filter of social media or the pull of work notifications. I'd told my team and family that I'd have limited connectivity, especially when I moved to the islands where service could be spotty. On my 5th day, I took an overnight train to Chiang Mai in the north. The journey itself was an adventure, sharing a small sleeper cabin with a retired Australian couple who regaled me with stories of their own travels across Southeast Asia. Chiang Mai captured my heart in ways Bangkok hadn't. The ancient city walls, the hundreds of temples dotting the landscape, the surrounding mountains shrouded in mist, it felt magical and grounding simultaneously. I extended my stay from the planned 4 days to 7, canceling my hotel in Phuket to give myself more time in this enchanting place. It was in Chiang Mai that I met Jordan, an American expatriate who'd been living in Thailand for 6 years. We struck up a conversation at a coffee shop when I overheard him speaking English with the barista. Jordan worked remotely as a graphic designer and had created a life that balanced work with his passion for Thai culture and Buddhism. We connected instantly, sharing similar views on work-life balance and the American tendency toward materialism. Over the next few days, we explored temples together, took a cooking class, and hiked to a waterfall in the nearby mountains. Jordan showed me aspects of local life I would have missed on my own hidden restaurants, markets only locals knew about, a monastery where he sometimes volunteered. On my last night in Chiang Mai, Jordan and a few of his expatriate friends threw me a small farewell dinner at a riverside restaurant. The night was perfect, lanterns reflecting on the water, delicious northern Thai cuisine, and conversation that ranged from philosophical to hilarious. For the first time in years, I felt completely present, unburdened by deadlines or responsibilities. The next day, slightly hungover but happy, I boarded a plane to Koh Samui to begin the island portion of my trip. The contrast between the mountainous north and the tropical beaches was striking. My beachfront bungalow was simple but perfect, a wooden structure with a mosquito net-draped bed, and a porch where I could watch the sunset over the Gulf of Thailand. It was here, 10 days into my trip, that the first hint of trouble emerged. I was having breakfast at the resort restaurant when I decided to check my email and messages. Among them was a text from my neighbor Brad. "Hey Matt, saw some people at your house yesterday moving furniture. Everything okay?" The message was 3 days old. I immediately tried calling Brad, but the connection was poor. I sent a text asking for more details, but I wasn't sure when I'd receive a response given the spotty service on the island. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach. Mom had my spare key, of course, and she occasionally stayed over, but Brad knew her. He wouldn't have found it noteworthy enough to text me if it had just been my mother. And what furniture would be moving? I tried calling my mom, but the call wouldn't connect. I sent her a message asking if everything was all right at the house, trying to keep my tone casual. Then I sent Amanda a similar message, figuring one of them would respond eventually. I tried to brush off my concerns and enjoy the day I'd planned a snorkeling excursion to a nearby marine park. The underwater world temporarily distracted me with its vibrant coral and tropical fish, but the nagging worry remained. That evening I received a brief reply from Amanda. "All good. Mom's handling some stuff for you. Enjoy your trip." Her message should have reassured me, but something about its vagueness only increased my unease. The next morning, I managed to connect with Mom briefly on a video call. The connection was terrible, her image freezing every few seconds, but what I could see troubled me. She appeared nervous, her smile too tight, her eyes not meeting the camera. "Is everything okay at the house?" I asked directly. "Oh yes, everything's fine," she said quickly. "Just doing a bit of cleaning and organizing for you. How's your trip?" Before I could press further, she claimed she had to go an appointment she couldn't miss. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my reflection in the black screen. For the next few days, I tried to continue enjoying my vacation, but the sense of dread grew. Brad sent another message saying he hadn't seen more activity, but thought I should know there was a "for sale" sign briefly in my yard before being removed the same day. This information sent me into a panic. I called my real estate agent in Seattle, but it was the middle of the night there, and I got her voicemail. I left an urgent message asking her to check if anyone had listed my house for sale, though I knew how absurd that sounded. Sleep became elusive as scenarios played in my mind. Could Mom be in financial trouble and trying to take a loan against my house? Had there been some catastrophic damage she was trying to handle without worrying me? Or was Amanda involved somehow? 2 days before I was scheduled to fly to my final destination of Phuket, I made the decision to cut my trip short. Something was seriously wrong, and the not knowing was worse than any reality I might face. I booked the next available flight back to Seattle, a complicated route that would take nearly 30 hours with layovers. As the plane lifted off from Koh Samui, I looked down at the paradise I was leaving behind. The turquoise waters and white sand beaches seemed to belong to another life now, one that had been interrupted by a sense of impending doom I couldn't shake. Throughout the endless flight, my mind cycled through possibilities, each more alarming than the last. By the time we began our descent into Seattle, I had convinced myself I was overreacting. There would be a simple explanation. There had to be. The Seattle that greeted me was typical for late spring overcast with a light drizzle that made everything glisten. After collecting my luggage, I splurged on a rideshare rather than taking public transportation, anxious to get home and put my fears to rest. As we turned onto my street, my heart began to race. From a distance, my house looked the same, the distinctive blue Craftsman with white trim that had stolen my heart 2 years ago. But as we drew closer, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was a silver Honda CR-V in my driveway that I'd never seen before. "You can stop here," I told the driver, deciding to approach on foot. I paid and thanked him, then stood on the sidewalk staring at my house with the strange car parked where my Toyota Prius should have been. My Prius was nowhere in sight. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the pathway to my front door. The garden looked different. Some of my carefully tended plants had been removed, replaced with generic shrubs. The welcome mat I'd chosen was gone, replaced by one that read, "Home Sweet Home" in curly script I would never have selected. With trembling hands, I pulled out my keys and tried to unlock the front door. The key wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it gently, then with more force. But it was useless. My key no longer fit my lock. Just as panic began to set in, the door swung open from the inside. A woman about my age stood there, her expression shifting from friendly curiosity to confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, one hand protectively on the door. "This is my house," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "I live here." The woman's face changed again, this time to something between alarm and pity. "I think there's been a mistake," she said carefully. "My husband and I bought this house 2 weeks ago. We moved in last week." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "That's not possible," I said. "I own this house. I've owned it for 2 years. I was just on vacation." A man appeared behind the woman, tall with glasses and a concerned expression. "Is everything okay, Jess?" "This man says he owns our house," she explained, her voice tight. "Sir," the man said, stepping forward, "I understand this must be confusing, but we purchased this property legally. We have all the paperwork. We closed on April 28th. April 28th. I'd been in Chiang Mai, extending my stay because I was having such a wonderful time. There has to be a mistake," I insisted, my mind racing. "I never sold my house. I've been in Thailand. I need to see this paperwork." The couple exchanged glances, clearly unsure whether I was confused, dangerous, or the victim of some terrible error. After a moment of silent communication, the husband nodded. "Wait here on the porch, please," he said. "I'll get our closing documents." As I waited, I tried calling my mother again. Straight to voicemail. Amanda, too. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified. The man returned with a folder full of papers. "Here," he said, handing me a document. "This is the deed transfer." I scanned the paper, and the world dropped out from under me completely. There it was, my address, the sale price of $680,000, and the seller listed as Diana Watson, power of attorney for Matthew Watson. My mother had sold my house. Using the emergency power of attorney I'd signed, my own mother had sold my house out from under me while I was on vacation. "I never authorized this," I said, my voice hollow. "This is fraud. My mother had no right to sell my property." The couple looked stricken. "We bought it from a woman who said her son was relocating internationally for work," the woman said. "She had all the legal documentation showing she had power of attorney. Our real estate agent verified everything." "Who was your agent?" I asked, grasping for any information that might help make sense of this nightmare. "Tracy Linwood, with Seattle Prime Realty," the husband answered promptly. I recognized the name. Tracy had shown me several houses before I bought this one. She knew me. She knew this was my house. "I need to make some calls," I said, suddenly aware that I was still standing on the porch with my suitcase, homeless in every sense of the word. "Can I get copies of these documents?" The husband nodded, disappearing back inside to make copies. The wife, Jess, looked at me with genuine concern. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked gently. The question hit me like a physical blow. Did I have somewhere to go? My house was gone. I had just returned from an international trip. I was jet-lagged, confused, and apparently the victim of fraud by my own mother. "I'll figure something out," I said automatically, the response I'd given to challenges my entire life. When the husband returned with the copies, I thanked them mechanically and turned to leave. As an afterthought, I asked, "What happened to my belongings?" "The house was empty when we took possession," Jess said. "The selling agent said everything had been moved to storage, but we weren't given details." I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. My entire life furniture I'd carefully selected, books I'd collected since college, mementos and photographs, my clothes, my computer all gone. Standing on the sidewalk outside what was no longer my home, I called Brad, my neighbor. He answered on the second ring. "Matt, you're back early. Is everything okay?" "No," I said simply. "Everything is not okay. Can I come over? I need a place to regroup." Brad didn't ask questions, just said, "Of course, man. Doors open." I walked the 20 yards to Brad's house in a daze. He met me at the door, his expression changing to alarm when he saw my face. "What happened?" "My mother sold my house while I was gone," I said, the words sounding absurd as they left my mouth. Brad ushered me inside, taking my suitcase and guiding me to his couch. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning with 2 beers. I accepted one gratefully, taking a long swallow before attempting to explain the situation. Brad listened without interruption as I recounted what I'd discovered. When I finished, he shook his head in disbelief. "That's insane, man. Completely insane. What are you going to do?" "First, I need to find my mother and sister. They're not answering their phones. Then I need a lawyer, a good one. You can stay here as long as you need," Brad offered immediately. "The guest room is yours." His kindness nearly broke me. I thanked him, fighting back the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. After finishing my beer, I began making calls to my bank, to real estate attorneys, to my own lawyer who had drafted the original power of attorney. With each call, the picture became clearer and more devastating. The $680,000 from the sale of my house had been wired to an account I didn't recognize. My mother had indeed used the power of attorney to execute the sale, but several aspects seemed legally questionable. The document had been intended for emergency situations related to the property, not for selling it entirely. Additionally, the sale price was well below market value. My house should have fetched at least $750,000 in the current market. By evening, I'd spoken to 3 attorneys, all of whom believed I had a strong case for fraud. I'd also discovered through online searches that Amanda had recently moved into a luxury apartment building in downtown Seattle, an address she certainly couldn't afford on her retail manager's salary. The final piece of the puzzle came when I contacted a storage facility across town and discovered that yes, they had units rented under my name, paid for 3 months in advance. At least my belongings hadn't been sold or discarded. That night, lying in Brad's guest room, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. In 24 hours, I'd gone from being a homeowner returning from a dream vacation to a victim of theft and betrayal by the people I trusted most in the world. The pain was physical, a hollowness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Yet beneath the pain, something else was building, a cold, clear determination. I'd worked too hard for too long to let anyone take what was mine, even my own family. Tomorrow, I would confront them, and then I would fight back. The luxury apartment building where Amanda now lived was a gleaming high-rise in South Lake Union, walking distance to Amazon headquarters and other tech companies. The lobby featured marble floors, a coffee bar, and a uniformed doorman, a far cry from the shabby walk-up she'd been renting the last time I visited her. "I'm here to see Amanda Watson," I told the doorman, who eyed my rumpled travel clothes with barely concealed disdain. "Name?" he asked coolly. "Matthew Watson, her brother." He made a call, speaking quietly into the phone. After a moment, he nodded. "20th floor, apartment 2010. Miss Watson is expecting you." The elevator ride gave me time to calm my racing heart and organize my thoughts. I'd spent the morning with a lawyer who had advised me to gather information but not reveal my legal plans yet. I needed to understand exactly what had happened and why. The elevator opened directly into a small private foyer for the penthouse apartments. Amanda's door was straight ahead, with a stylish gold-tone 2010 mounted at eye level. I took a deep breath and knocked. Amanda opened the door wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. Her hair was freshly highlighted, her nails professionally manicured. She looked like someone who had recently come into money. "Well, look who's back from paradise early," she said, her tone falsely bright. "Come in, world traveler. Mom's here too." I stepped into the apartment and momentarily forgot my anger as I took in the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Lake Union and the Space Needle. The furnishings were clearly new: a sectional sofa in butter-soft leather, abstract art on the walls, a dining table that looked like a single slab of exotic hardwood. Everything screamed expensive. My mother sat perched nervously on the edge of the sofa. She looked older than when I'd left just weeks ago, her face drawn with stress despite her attempts at a welcoming smile. "Matthew," she said, standing to approach me for a hug. I stepped back, avoiding her embrace. "Don't," I said quietly. The smile fell from her face. Amanda rolled her eyes and flopped onto the sofa, stretching out like a cat. "So dramatic," she muttered. I told you he'd be like this, Mom. You sold my house, I said, my voice steady despite the rage and hurt churning inside me. You sold my house without my knowledge or consent while I was on vacation. Mom had the decency to look ashamed, but Amanda just shrugged. You're always bragging about how good you are with money. Figure it out. The casualness of her response stoked my anger to new heights. Figure it out? You stole from me, both of you, and your response is, figure it out? We didn't steal anything, Amanda shot back. Mom had legal authority. You signed the papers yourself. For emergencies related to the house, I countered. Not to sell it completely. You know that's not what that document was for. Details, Amanda said with a dismissive wave of her hand. The important thing is that everything worked out. I needed help. Mom helped me, and you'll be fine. You always are. What exactly did you need help with that required stealing and selling my house? I demanded. Amanda and Mom exchanged glances. It was my mother who finally answered. Your sister was in trouble, Matthew. Serious trouble. She owed money to some very dangerous people. $220,000. They were threatening her. I stared at her in disbelief. And your solution was to sell my house rather than go to the police? Or talk to me? We tried to call you, Mom said weakly. You weren't answering. Because I was on a planned vacation that you both knew about, I said. A vacation where I specifically said I'd have limited connectivity. That's not the same as being unreachable in an emergency. We didn't have time to wait, Amanda interjected. These weren't the kind of people who give extensions. Who exactly owed you $220,000? I asked incredulously. Amanda had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I got involved with some investment opportunities that didn't pan out. She means illegal gambling, Mom clarified, ignoring Amanda's glare. And some loans for a business venture with her ex-boyfriend. The absurdity of the situation was almost laughable. Almost. So you committed fraud and sold my house to pay off Amanda's gambling debts and failed business loans? Do you have any idea how insane that sounds? Neither of them answered directly. Instead, Amanda gestured around the apartment. Look, I've got a fresh start now. The debts are cleared. I've got a nice place, and I'm interviewing for management positions at several boutiques next week. Everything worked out. Everything worked out? I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Everything worked out for you, you mean? I came home to find strangers living in my house. All my possessions are in storage. I have nowhere to live. How exactly has everything worked out? Amanda rolled her eyes again. Don't be so dramatic. You make 6 figures at Amazon. You can buy another house. That's not the point, I shouted, finally losing my composure. That was my house. Mine. I worked for years to save the down payment. I carefully selected every piece of furniture, planted the garden, made it my home. You had no right. You always think you're so much better than everyone else, Amanda snapped, sitting up straight now, her own anger flaring. Mr. Perfect with his perfect job and his perfect house and his perfect life. Some of us struggle, Matthew. Some of us need help sometimes. I've helped you, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. I've given you money for rent when you were short. I paid for your car repairs last year. I've never turned you away when you needed reasonable help. But this is theft. This is betrayal. We had no choice, Mom insisted, tears forming in her eyes. These people were threatening Amanda. What was I supposed to do? Let them hurt her? You weren't here. You were off enjoying Thailand while your sister was in danger. The guilt trip might have worked once, but not today. Not after what they'd done. You could have contacted me. You could have called my friends, my employer. You could have gone to the police. You had countless options that didn't involve stealing my house. Look who's homeless now, Amanda said with a cruel laugh. Not so perfect anymore, are you? The statement hit like a slap, not just for its callousness, but for the revelation behind it. This wasn't just about helping Amanda out of trouble. There was satisfaction in their actions, a perverse pleasure in taking me down a notch. I stood very still, processing this realization. Then, strangely, I felt my lips curve into a small smile. What's so funny? Amanda snapped, irritated by my unexpected reaction. I maintained the smile but said nothing, gathering my things to leave. Seriously, what are you smiling about? She demanded, standing now, her confidence wavering at my unexpected calm. You have no idea what you've done, I said, quietly, heading for the door. What's that supposed to mean? Mom called after me, anxiety evident in her voice. I turned back one last time. You'll find out soon enough. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my lawyer, moving forward with all options. They admitted everything. The offices of Kingston, Meyer and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown office tower with views of Elliott Bay. The reception area spoke of old money and discretion, leather chairs, oil paintings, and not a legal advertisement in sight. This wasn't a firm that needed to chase ambulances or advertise on billboards. Sarah Kingston had been recommended by a senior engineer at Amazon who'd gone through a complicated divorce. If you need someone who can handle delicate situations with a sledgehammer, she's your person, he'd said. After my initial consultation the previous day, I understood the recommendation. Sarah was waiting for me in her corner office, elegant in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. At 45, she had the polished confidence of someone who knew exactly how good she was at her job. Matthew, she greeted me, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. How did the confrontation go? I took a seat, placing my phone on her desk. Better than expected, from an evidence standpoint. I recorded the entire conversation. Sarah's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly the closest she came to showing surprise. And they admitted to selling the house without proper authorization? They admitted to everything, I confirmed. Using the power of attorney inappropriately, selling well below market value, using the money to pay off Amanda's debts and buy her that ridiculous apartment. They even acknowledged that they knew I was unreachable because I was on vacation, not because I was actually unavailable for emergency contact. Did they express any remorse? She asked, making notes on a legal pad. I laughed humorlessly. Quite the opposite. My sister actually mocked me for being homeless now. They tried to justify it by claiming she was in danger from creditors, but there was no mistaking the satisfaction they took in knocking me down a peg. Sarah nodded, continuing to write. The recording is excellent. Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings, but since this was in your sister's home where there's limited expectation of privacy in common areas, and the conversation involved alleged criminal activity in which they were participants, we have several exceptions available to us. She set down her pen and looked at me directly. Based on what you've told me and the documentation you've provided, we have a very strong case for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of property, and potentially elder abuse, given how your mother manipulated the situation. Elder abuse? I questioned. My mother is only 58. Washington's vulnerable adult statutes can apply in cases where someone exploits a position of trust, regardless of age, Sarah explained. But that's a secondary consideration. The core issues are the fraudulent use of the power of attorney and the conversion of your property. She pulled out a thick folder and spread several documents on the desk between us. I've been busy since our meeting yesterday. First, I've confirmed that the power of attorney document your mother used was indeed the limited one you signed 2 years ago. It specifically authorized her to address maintenance issues and emergency situations related to your property. It did not authorize her to sell the property. So the sale is invalid? I asked, hope rising for the first time. Potentially, Sarah said cautiously. It's complicated. Your mother presented herself to the real estate agent and the buyers as having full authority. The title company should have caught this discrepancy, but they apparently relied on the representation from the real estate agent that everything was in order. She pointed to another document. I've also discovered something very interesting. The notary stamp on the deed transfer doesn't match the signature page. I believe your mother may have attached your properly notarized power of attorney document to a different signature page, authorizing the sale. That's forgery, I said, stunned at how far my mother had gone. Yes, it is, Sarah confirmed grimly. Criminal forgery. And that changes our approach significantly. She laid out several more documents. I've also tracked the money trail. The proceeds from the sale went first to an account in your mother's name, then were immediately dispersed to several creditors, primarily a company called Westlake Investments, which appears to be a front for a less than legitimate lending operation, and to the real estate company that manages your sister's new apartment building for a year's lease paid in advance. My head was spinning with all the information. So what's our next step? We pursue this on two fronts, Sarah said decisively. Civil and criminal. Civilly, we file suit against your mother, your sister, the real estate agent, the title company, and potentially the notary involved. Criminally, we present our evidence to the prosecutor's office for potential charges of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. And the house? I asked, still struggling to accept that strangers were living in my home. That's the most complicated part, Sarah admitted. The couple who purchased it are innocent victims in this as well. They paid fair value for what they believed was a properly listed home. Unwinding that transaction won't be simple or quick. At minimum, they'll need to be compensated for their costs and inconvenience if the sale is invalidated. I nodded, understanding the complexity. What about my personal belongings? We can get a court order immediately to secure those items, Sarah assured me. In fact, I've already drafted the emergency motion. She slid a document across the desk for my review. As I read through the motion, Sarah continued outlining her strategy. I've also contacted Tracy Linwood, the real estate agent involved. She's understandably concerned about her professional liability and has indicated she might be willing to provide a statement about how your mother represented herself during the listing process. Tracy knew me, I said, still struggling to understand how this had happened. She showed me houses before I bought this one. She knew it was my primary residence. According to our preliminary conversation, your mother told her you had accepted a position overseas and needed to sell quickly before departing, Sarah explained. Miss Linwood admits she should have verified this directly with you, but claims your mother was very convincing and had documentation that appeared legitimate. And the below-market sale price? Sarah's expression hardened. That's where things get even more interesting. The commission on the sale was unusually high, 7% instead of the standard 3%. And Miss Linwood handled both sides of the transaction as a dual agent. She profited extra from a quick under-market sale, I concluded, the betrayal cutting deeper with each new revelation. Exactly, Sarah confirmed, which gives us significant leverage in negotiations with her and her brokerage. Over the next 2 hours, we methodically built our case, reviewing documents, planning legal strategies, and preparing for what would likely be a complex and protracted legal battle. By the time we finished, I had signed authorizations for Sarah to proceed with multiple legal actions, including an emergency petition to freeze any remaining assets from the house sale. Before I left her office, Sarah asked the question I'd been avoiding. Matthew, I need to know your end goal here. Are you prepared to see your mother and sister face criminal charges? Because once we involve the prosecutor's office, that process takes on a life of its own. I hesitated, the reality of what lay ahead finally hitting me. These were not anonymous criminals or business adversaries. They were my family, my only family. Yet they had stolen from me without remorse, had taken pleasure in my distress. I want justice, I said finally. But I also want to understand why. What made them think this was acceptable? What broke in our relationship that they could do this to me? Sarah nodded, her expression softening slightly. Those are different questions, and legal proceedings may not answer them. But let's start with securing your position and protecting what's left of your assets. The emotional reckoning can come later. As I left the building, the Seattle skyline was hidden behind a curtain of rain-fitting weather for my mood. I had always been the responsible one, the one who fixed problems rather than creating them. Now I found myself in a battle against the people who should have been most in my corner, fighting for what was rightfully mine. That evening, I visited the storage facility where my belongings had been hastily deposited. The manager led me to 3 large units filled with the physical manifestations of my life. Furniture stacked haphazardly, boxes unlabeled, framed photos, tossed carelessly atop kitchen appliances. The disorder was another violation, another sign of how little respect my family had shown for me and my possessions. I spent hours there, sorting through boxes until I found clothes, my laptop, and a few personal items I could use while staying with Brad. The whole time, a question echoed in my mind. How had it come to this? What had I missed in our family dynamic that made my mother and sister feel entitled to take everything I'd worked for? I had no answers, only the determination to set things right. And as Sarah Kingston had promised, we would use every legal tool available to do exactly that. Sarah Kingston's office buzzed with activity as her team prepared for our first court appearance. In the week since our initial meeting, we had filed for emergency injunctions, sent formal notices to all parties involved, and gathered substantial evidence supporting our claims of fraud and misrepresentation. I sat in the conference room reviewing documents when Sarah entered with an expression I hadn't seen before, something between surprise and satisfaction. "We've made an interesting discovery," she announced, placing a folder on the table. "One that changes our approach entirely." "What kind of discovery?" I asked, setting aside the affidavit I'd been reading. Sarah opened the folder and pushed a document toward me. "This is the property record for your Seattle house. Notice anything unusual about the ownership?" I scanned the document, focusing on the section she indicated. There, in black and white, was the owner's name, Northwest Property Holdings, LLC. "That's my LLC," I said slowly, the implications dawning on me. "I set it up last year for tax purposes after I bought the place in New York." Sarah smiled, a predatory gleam in her eye. "Exactly. The house your mother sold wasn't actually titled in your name as an individual. It was owned by your LLC. The power of attorney she used applied to you personally, not to the LLC, which is a separate legal entity." The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. So she had no legal authority to sell the property at all, not even with the power of attorney. "None whatsoever," Sarah confirmed. "The sale is completely invalid on its face. Your mother sold a property that neither she nor you personally owned. Northwest Property Holdings, LLC, is the legal owner, and only someone with authority to act on behalf of the LLC could authorize its sale." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. "So, legally, the house is still mine? Or rather, still belongs to my LLC?" "Yes," Sarah said decisively. "Though unwinding this will still be complicated. The buyers have possession and believe they purchased it legally. The money has changed hands, but the fundamental fact remains the seller had no legal right to sell." I thought about the young couple now living in my house, innocent victims of my mother's fraud. What does this mean for them? Sarah's expression grew more serious. "They've been defrauded as well. Their title insurance should protect them financially, but they'll need to find new housing. The title company will likely sue your mother, and potentially the real estate agency for their losses." The scope of the disaster my mother had created was expanding by the day. And the real estate agent? Tracy? "She failed in her basic due diligence," Sarah said bluntly. "A simple check of the property records would have shown that the house was owned by an LLC, not by you personally. She's facing potential license suspension at minimum, not to mention civil liability." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. The vindication was overwhelming, but so was the complexity of the situation. So what's our next step? Sarah outlined the revised strategy, which now focused on asserting the LLC's ownership rights and pursuing damages, rather than trying to invalidate a sale that was already legally void. We would need to notify all parties immediately, file amended complaints, and prepare for significant resistance. As we wrapped up the meeting, Sarah asked the question that had been hovering unspoken. "Why didn't you mention the LLC ownership before?" I sighed, embarrassed by the oversight. "Honestly, I forgot. When I set up the company for the New York property, my accountant suggested transferring the Seattle house to the same LLC for tax efficiency. The paperwork was handled while I was focused on the New York purchase. In my mind, I still thought of the Seattle house as being in my name." Sarah nodded, understanding. "It's a common situation with investment properties. The important thing is that we caught it now, before proceedings advanced too far." The following day, I met with the buyers of my Seattle house, Jason and Jessica Martin. Their shock and distress upon learning the truth mirrored what I had felt upon returning from Thailand. They had spent their life savings on the down payment, had begun renovations, had enrolled their 4-year-old daughter in the neighborhood preschool. "We had no idea," Jessica said, fighting back tears. "The sale seemed completely legitimate. We had inspections, title searches, everything normal." "I understand," I assured them, feeling genuine sympathy for their situation. "You're victims in this too." Jason's expression hardened. "Your mother seemed so genuine. She showed us family photos, told us stories about your childhood in the house. It was all lies." I winced at this new revelation. My mother had created an elaborate fiction to sell them my house, a house I had purchased only 2 years ago, where neither Amanda nor I had ever lived as children. After discussing the situation with Sarah, I made the Martins an offer. They could remain in the house for up to 3 months, while their title insurance claim was processed and they found new housing. In return, they would cooperate fully with our legal proceedings against my mother, the real estate agent, and the title company. They accepted gratefully, the tension in the room easing slightly. As they prepared to leave, Jessica turned back to me. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she said sincerely. "Family betrayal is the worst kind." Her compassion, offered in the midst of her own crisis, moved me deeply. I thanked her, unable to find more adequate words. That evening, I visited my Seattle house, still legally mine, though temporarily occupied by the Martins. They had invited me to collect any personal items they might have found during their move-in and renovations. The visit was surreal, seeing my home transformed by new furniture, different paint colors, unfamiliar scents. As I walked through the rooms, memories of my own hopeful move-in day flooded back. The pride I'd felt at achieving this milestone, the careful selection of each furnishing, the plans I'd made for the future, all of it had been violated by the people I should have been able to trust most. Yet standing there, watching Jessica's daughter play in what had been my home office, I felt an unexpected sense of perspective. Houses could be recovered or replaced. The true loss was the trust and relationship with my family, a loss that no court order could restore. The conference room at Kingston, Meyer, and Associates was set for mediation. On one side sat my mother and sister with their attorney, a harried-looking man who had repeatedly tried to contact Sarah to work something out before formal proceedings began. On the other side sat Sarah and I, alongside the representatives from the title company and the Martins' title insurance provider. My mother looked smaller somehow, the confident woman who had raised me now diminished by the consequences of her actions. Amanda maintained her defiant posture, but her designer outfit couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the nervous tapping of her fingernails against the table. The mediator, a retired judge with a reputation for resolving complex family disputes, opened the session by establishing ground rules and clarifying the purpose of our meeting, to find a resolution that addressed the legal violations while potentially avoiding criminal prosecution. Sarah presented our case first, methodically outlining the facts: the fraudulent use of the power of attorney, the sale of property belonging to an LLC without authorization, the distribution of funds, and the multiple parties harmed by these actions. When she finished, the room fell silent. The mediator turned to my mother's attorney, who cleared his throat nervously before beginning a much weaker counterargument, focused primarily on my mother's lack of criminal intent and her desire to protect her daughter. As the legalities were debated, I watched my mother, searching for any sign of the woman who had once worked double shifts to keep a roof over our heads after my father died. The woman who had taught me about integrity and hard work. Where had that person gone? When had protecting Amanda at all costs become more important than basic honesty and respect? The technical discussions continued for hours, with proposals and counter-proposals about financial restitution, liability allocation, and potential settlements. Through it all, my mother remained largely silent, speaking only when directly addressed. Amanda grew increasingly agitated, finally erupting when the mediator suggested she might bear financial responsibility for her role. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I didn't sell anything. I just needed help, and Mom helped me. Why am I being punished for that?" The mediator regarded her calmly. "Miss Watson, accepting funds that you knew or should have known were obtained fraudulently makes you an accessory. Additionally, The evidence suggests you were aware of and encouraged the sale of property that didn't belong to your mother or brother. Amanda looked to her attorney for support, but he merely winced and suggested she might want to consider the mediator's perspective. By late afternoon, the broad strokes of an agreement were taking shape. The LLC would retain ownership of the Seattle house. The title company would compensate the Martins and help them secure new housing. My mother and sister would be required to return all remaining funds from the sale and enter into a structured repayment plan for money already spent. The question of criminal charges remained. As the named victim, I would have significant influence over whether the prosecutor's office pursued the case, though the final decision remained with them. During a break, I found myself alone with my mother in the hallway outside the conference room. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her since this began. "I never meant to hurt you, Matthew," she said quietly. "I just didn't know what else to do. Amanda was in so much trouble, and you were always so capable, so strong. I thought you'd land on your feet, like you always do." "That doesn't make it right," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. "You stole from me, Mom. You and Amanda took pleasure in the fact that I was homeless. How could you do that to your own son?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "Amanda has always been fragile. You're the strong one. You've always been the strong one. Being strong doesn't mean I deserve to be taken advantage of," I said. "Being responsible doesn't make me less deserving of consideration and respect." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." When the mediation resumed, I made my decision about criminal charges. I would not actively push for prosecution if my mother and sister complied fully with the civil resolution, completed financial counseling, and maintained appropriate boundaries going forward. However, I made it clear that any violation of our agreement would result in immediate criminal complaints. The mediator drafted the final agreement, which all parties signed by early evening. As we prepared to leave, Amanda approached me, her earlier defiance replaced by something that wasn't quite remorse but at least resembled recognition. "I never thought it would go this far," she said. "I just needed help, and you always seem to have everything figured out." "That's not how family is supposed to work, Amanda," I replied. "Success isn't a reason to be targeted. I would have helped you if you'd asked directly, but not like this. Never like this." She nodded, unable or unwilling to say more. In the weeks and months that followed, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The Seattle house remained in my LLC's name, but I decided to sell it legitimately. Too many negative associations now attached to a place that had once represented achievement and security. I helped the Martins find a comparable home in the same neighborhood, even covering some of their moving expenses despite having no legal obligation to do so. My primary residence became my New York apartment, where I'd already been spending significant time for work. The distance from Seattle provided emotional space to process what had happened and to redefine my relationship with my family. My mother complied with all aspects of our agreement, attending financial counseling and making regular restitution payments. Our relationship would never be what it once was, but over time we established a new dynamic based on clearer boundaries and expectations. Amanda struggled more with the consequences of her actions. The luxury apartment was gone, replaced by a modest rental. The pattern of financial irresponsibility proved harder to break, but without my mother's enabling, she was finally forced to confront her own behavior. Our interactions remained minimal and carefully structured. The hardest lesson was learning to trust again. The betrayal by my closest family members had shaken my foundation in ways I never anticipated. Yet through this painful experience, I discovered the true meaning of family, not just those connected by blood, but those who respect, support, and honor their relationships. Brad and his wife became like family, their steadfast support during my darkest days creating a bond that blood relatives had failed to maintain. Jordan, my friend from Thailand, visited me in New York, bringing with him the perspective and wisdom that had drawn me to him initially. I established stronger legal protections for my assets, but more importantly, I developed a healthier approach to success and achievement. My worth wasn't measured by what I owned or accomplished, and my responsibility to others didn't mean sacrificing my own well-being or allowing myself to be exploited. A year after returning from Thailand to find my house sold, I finally took another vacation, this time to Japan, with proper legal protections in place and trusted friends checking on my property. Standing beneath cherry blossoms in Kyoto, I realized I had found something beyond resilience or recovery. I had found peace not despite the betrayal, but because I had faced it, addressed it, and refused to let it define me. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other, but it also teaches us invaluable lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and the true meaning of love and respect. I wouldn't wish my experience on anyone, but I'm no longer bitter about what happened. Instead, I'm grateful for the wisdom it forced me to develop, and the authentic relationships it helped me recognize and nurture. Have you ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild afterward? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that your worth isn't diminished by others' actions, and sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you relationships built on genuine respect and trust.